If you're thinking of buying a budget LED grow light, this program is perfect for you. I'm going to have a look at 6 different LED lights. They all have a lower price range and they're very popular on sites like Amazon. I want to do a comparison of all 3 lights. We're going to have a look at the features, the price, but most importantly, I'm going to have a look at how much light these units actually produce. Do they produce enough light to grow plants? And if they do, how big of an area do they cover? What kind of plants can you grow? I'm going to create a PPFD map for each one of these. If you're not familiar with that, stick around. That map is critical for evaluating LED grow lights. And I've produced one for each of the 6 lights I'm going to look at. If you go shopping for these lights, you always see them with all kinds of plants underneath them. And the lights are foot to 2 feet above these plants. Does that really work with a budget LED grow light? The first light I'd like to have a look at is what I call the ring light. It's essentially a ring and the LEDs are inside here. You take this top piece, screw it into an arm. The arm pushes into a base, and there's the light. There's a controller so we can adjust the light coming in. And you can set the time for that, and you can set the intensity you want. Many of these inexpensive lights have that feature that you can adjust the intensity from 100% to 50, 25, and so on. I don't know why they bother giving you that feature. As you'll see in a few minutes, the amount of light coming out of here is pretty low, and I would never run them under 100%. This particular model has this base, and it's plastic, so it's really not heavy enough to hold the thing up. I'd be really worried about taking your plant off of here, watering it, because while you're doing that, this is going to fall over and damage the lamp. So you need to keep a weight on here. This does raise and lower. And if you look at the advertising, you'll see a plant down here with a lot of space between the light and the plant. That's a critical question you have to answer, is how far does this need to be? Can I really have this light a foot above the plant? Will it produce enough light to grow the plant that far away? And we're going to answer that question for you in a second. You know, it's kind of interesting that when I looked at the instructions, they actually give you a PPF value. Now that's the measure of light, but the units they give for that is actually a PPFD. That's the number we want. So they have the units we want, but the label is wrong. Now they say this value is 25. I don't know what that means. It really doesn't mean anything because they have the units wrong. If it was a PPFD value of 25, it is also important to specify how high the light was when you measured that. Is that 25 at a foot away from the light or 6 inches from the light? That's a critical thing to know. So it's pretty obvious that this manufacturer doesn't actually even know what grow lights are. Now the price of this was $10 US on Amazon. I'm going to go through the lights in the order of price, so this is the least expensive. I'm going to put a link in the description below for all of these products, and the link is an Amazon link, and I'll put one in for US and another one in for Canada. Alright, so how much light can I get out of this light? Well, to know that, we have to get the PPFD map. This shows us how much light is hitting the table under the light at various positions and at various heights. What I did was take a bench in my plant room where there's not much light. It's actually part of my workbench, and I marked the surface in various spots. Then I set the light up above the bench so that it's exactly 1 foot above the sensor of my meter. I want to know how much light is coming out of this light 1 foot below it at various spots on this table. That's a PPFD map. Here's the map for this particular light. Now you'll see a circle in the middle. That's right under the light. And then you'll see numbers radiating out from that circle. And you can see the distance markings there. I've made the squares 1 foot square. And the values are the PPFD values in the middle of the square. Off to the right, you'll see a blue square. Those are the recommended PPFD values for growing various types of plants. So low light plants want to grow in the range of 75 to 300. Medium light from 300 to 500, and high light plants 500 to 700. The most light that we got out of this lamp was 24. So that's way below what you need for low light plants. Remember that we measured with the light 1 foot above the sensor. If we move the light closer to the sensor, that value does go up. And so on the right hand side, you'll see a smaller square, which measures the values in the center at various heights. So for this light, we have a value of 24 at 12 inches, 69 at 6 inches, and 186 at 3 inches. So what this tells us is that this light can be used for low light plants. It doesn't produce enough light for the medium light plant. But in order to grow those low light plants, we have to have the light something like 5 inches above the plant or even lower. This light is only suitable for growing plants if we keep it very close to the plant. And since it's such a small light, it's really only good for one plant. Now it is kind of cute looking and it might look nice on a table somewhere. So as a decorative light, it probably works quite well. But it's pretty much useless for growing, say, a bunch of new seedlings that you have. First of all, it doesn't have enough light for that, and it won't cover the area you need. As soon as you move away from the light, the intensity drops off so low that it's not going to grow anything. You don't get much light for $10. The second light I'd like to look at is this one here. They come as thin panels, and this particular unit has 2 of them. These are designed to be mounted underneath a shelf. So if you have something like a bookshelf, for instance, and you want to mount these, then you can grow some plants underneath it. And you can either just stick these to the shelf. It does come with double-sided tape. You could screw them in if you want. Or if you want to hang it, you can also put in some little hangers for that. You can also take 2 of these and put them on the same shelf, and that will increase the amount of light you get. But in my testing, I just tested 1 of these strips. It also comes with a little controller so we can control the light coming on. That's high. You can reduce intensity. It has 10 different levels. But as I said before, that's kind of useless. These lights aren't strong enough to bother with that. You're going to run these full tilt all the time. These are 20-watt lights, and I suspect each one of these is 10 watts. Now, the last light we looked at, the ring light, that was also 10 watt. The wattage tells you how much electricity the units use. It does not tell you how much light they produce. That's a common myth. So ignore the wattage unless you're trying to calculate what it's going to cost you to run these lights. This manufacturer does show you the spectra, and I'm finding that almost every light that is called LED now shows you the spectra. To be quite honest with you, the spectras all look pretty much the same. And I think the reason is that the manufacturers of the little LED chips have now come out with one that's white light, but the spectra is exactly what plants need. So that's what makes this a grow light. They have chips on here designed for plants. They look white. They give nice blue, nice red, a little green, a little yellow, just what plants need. Now, these lower-end plants do not have infrared, and infrared can be important for flowering, but it's not needed for growing green leaves. For most houseplants and seedlings, the quality of the light here is just right for plants. Also, how much light do these give out? I was actually quite surprised at how bright these ones were. And this is one of the problems gardeners have. Our eyes are actually quite sensitive to light. We'll look at a light and say, wow, that's really bright. But plants aren't so sensitive. They need pretty high light to make a difference. And that's why we want to go to the PPFD map. And I also made one for one of these panels. In the center, we got 54 PPFD. Again, that's 12 inches above the surface. As we move away from that, the light drops off fairly quickly. But you can see that the 2 by 2 foot square around the light gives us a value of somewhere between 25 and 30. Now, if we compare that to the amount of light that plants need, it really isn't enough to grow plants at the 1-foot height. Now, if we lower that down, we get higher values. So the 12-inch value is 54, the value at 6 inches is 124, and the value at 3 inches is 240. We're still in the range of low light plants, but at least we're getting to the upper range of that. So this particular unit produces a lot more light than the ring light did. The price of the light was $17 for the 2 units, so it's about the same price as the other one because with the ring light we only got one for $10. But we're getting a lot more light for our money. With these you should be able to grow some decent low light house plants as long as they're pretty close to the area under the lamp. Don't move too far around the edges. The next light I'd like to have a look at is one that I call the arm light. I don't know what else to call it. They usually have 2 or even 4 lights attached to flexible arms, so you can move them in whatever direction you want. Usually in the pictures they show them kind of like this, so that each arm is lighting up a whole group of plants. In fact, one of the pictures I found made this look like it's a really tall light in comparison to the person that's in the picture. Well, those are just exaggerations from the marketing department. This is a 20-watt light. So again, 10 watts per arm, which is very similar to the other lights that we looked at. The price of this is also $17. So it's the same as the panel lights we just looked at. Again, it comes with a controller and you can turn on the lights with that. And then you can dim them if you like. Same story as the others. No point in doing that. Inside these lights, there's actually different colored LED chips. And you can control which ones you want on. This is now just a white light. This has a lot of red and yellow chips. And this has all of them. Now the reason light manufacturers have built that in is that if you go and look at the high quality grow lights, some of them did have a blue mode and a grow mode. And they changed the ratio of red to blue. Now that has some value if you're doing some very specialized growing. But for the average gardeners, just leave them all on all the time. That's especially true for these budget lights where you're not getting much light anyways. Why would you turn some of these LEDs on? That just gives you even less light. So when you're running these, always run them with everything on. Now you can buy these lights in 2 formats. Some come with a stand, and so these are sitting at the top of the stand. A less expensive version is one that comes with a clamp down here. So you just open the clamp and put it on the side of a table, and then your lights are up above. So how much light do these guys have? Well, here's the PPFD map. You'll see that in the center, we have 23. Now this is with both arms on, and they were about 3 inches apart. So I'm using both arms to produce this light. If you compare that to the flat panels, that's less than one flat panel was giving me. So the flat panels I just reviewed are much better lights as far as the amount of light that comes out. As soon as you move away from that center, the light drops off pretty quick. We have values of 10 to 14 within that 2 by 2 foot square. That's a really, really low level for growing plants. In fact, it's pretty much impossible to grow plants at the 1 foot height. So these marketing pictures that you see with these lights way above the plants and big plants, that's just marketing stuff. You're not going to be able to grow plants like that. If we change the height, we see that at 12 inches we have a value of 23, and that goes up to 44 at 6 inches and up to 90 at 3 inches. We need 75 as a minimum to grow low light plants. So these arm lights are almost useless for growing plants. You could grow a couple very low light plants if the bulbs are right next to the plant. Quite honestly, the PPFD map tells you an important thing here. These lights are pretty much useless as far as growing plants go. Now you might find them decorative, and they may be used as supplementary light if you have a lot of other light. But for growing plants, pretty much useless. The next light I'd like to have a look at is a shop light. Now on Amazon, a very popular brand is the Barrina light, and it's a pretty good light. I have a slightly different brand that I bought a couple years ago. It is an LED light. It has 2 bulbs in a fixture, but it's not really a grow light. It's just a shop light that gives white light. So unlike the 3 lights we just looked at, we don't know what the spectra is. It might be good for plants and it might not be. We're not really sure. But it is a white light, so I'm guessing the spectra is not going to be too much different than the lights we've just looked at. They're probably using the same kind of LED chips, but who knows? I can't say that for sure. These shop lights are a little more expensive. They're $20 each if you buy 4 at a time. Now, if you buy the Barrina type, you'll buy them as single units, and you can put 2 together to give you a little more light. What is the PPFD value from these? Well, the manufacturer doesn't tell us that either because they don't care about growing plants. So let's go and measure the PPFD value. Keep in mind that these lights are 4 feet long. So in this area of 2 by 4 feet, you're going to see more light at the ends with this light than you did with the other lights, which tend to be more centered in the area. And that's in fact one of the benefits of shop lights, is that you get a lot of light over a longer distance, so you can put more plants underneath it. In the center, we got a value of 70. As we move 6 inches away from that center, we drop down to around 50. And as you get closer to the ends, it drops down to about 36, 38. So at the 12-inch height, that's still not quite enough to grow houseplants. But if we lower these lights, we actually get some pretty good values. So the 12-inch height value was 70. At 6 inches, we get 135. And at 3 inches, we get 188. And those values are for the center spot. Remember that for low light plants, we need something in the range of 75 to 300. So we could grow quite a few low range plants under these, and we'd have some value, somewhere around 130 to 200. That's pretty good for low light plants. Still not enough light for high light plants, but for low light, they work fine. And a lot of people use these lights for seedlings. Now, I prefer to grow my seedlings at the same light level that the adults use. So for things like tomatoes and peppers, which are highlight plants, these shop lights don't produce enough light, but they will grow reasonable seedlings. One of the advantages for shop lights is that they fit stands that were made for 4-foot fluorescent bulbs, and there's a lot of those around. So if you have an older unit like that and you want to move to LED, these are a good option. If you have a 4-foot shelf and you try to put these smaller units in there, you're going to have to buy several of them. You might as well go and buy some shop lights. Keep in mind that with shop lights, we have a low light, and so you're going to have to keep them closer to your plants. But you can use them for things like African violets and seedlings, and they do quite well. The next light I'd like to look at is a true grow light, but it is one of the budget units. This is the GeryLove SP1000. And it has a very common design. A lot of the new LED grow lights are made this way. There's an aluminum plate. On the back is a transformer to supply the electricity for the lights. And the LED chips are then glued on this surface. And they can use quite a few chips and put them close together so you can get a fairly intense light with this. The price of this unit is $54 US. So it costs about twice the other units that we've looked at so far. Because it's a true LED grow light, it also gives you a good spectra analysis. And the other thing that can be very important is that this has some infrared chips. These are the far infrared, and we're finding out that that kind of light is important for plant growth and especially for flowering. The lamps that we've looked at up to this point have not had those kind of chips. So that's one reason these tend to be a little more expensive. The other reason is that they use a better quality chip and they use more of them, and that drives up the price. One downside of these lamps is that there's no timers. All of the other units I've looked at so far had a built-in timer and a little controller, so you could set it for 12 hours on and 12 hours off. This light would have to be plugged into a timer, which is a separate purchase, and then you set the time on that. To control the amount of light you get, there's a little dial here. So right now we're off. I'm sure you concluded from the video that this one has a little bit more light than the others we've looked at. This manufacturer gives you a PPFD map as part of the marketing material, and it shows you the values at different heights below the light. That tells me it's a true grow light. But we're going to measure this one just like the others and use my setup and my meter. Let's have a look at the values I got. You can see the center here is 542. That's almost 10 times the value we were getting from some of the other lights. Even in that central area, the 4 square feet, we're getting values of about 260, 270. At 12 inches high, this unit gives you enough light to grow low light plants and also medium light plants. If we lower this light a little bit, so we go down to 6 inches, we now have a value of 1350. That's enough light to grow just about everything, including the high light plants. And at 3 inches, wow, you're way up to 2250, which is actually more light than you get from sunlight. So that could do some real damage to plants. These lights are designed to be much higher up than some of the lower cost options. Now you might notice in the title it says this is a 1000 watt lamp. That's something that LED grow light manufacturers tend to do. I don't know why they do it, but they exaggerate the number. This is actually a 100 watt light. That's the energy it's drawing in. But for some reason, all the manufacturers add another 0 just to confuse people. So here we have a light that for $54, we can grow high light plants under it. For our final light, I'd like to have a look at a brand new light that I just received and it just hit the markets. It's the Letpot LED grow light. Now you might know Letpot for their hydroponic system. Well, this is just a light component. They're getting into that market as well. Price on this is $85 and it's a 60 watt unit. As you'll see, it has a pretty good light level, but it has some other advantages that might make you pick this one. This is the light itself. It has a mobile arm so you can position it wherever you want. It also comes with extra pieces here so you can make this stand much taller. And it has a really solid base. So it's a self-supporting unit. Comes with a nice handheld controller. And if I turn it on, it looks like this. This is maximum. And then you can also set it for 50%. Again, I don't really see the point of that. You can also control this light with an app. So you can use your cell phone and control it, set the timer, set the levels, and so on. The previous light I showed you was a little less expensive, but it didn't come with a stand. You'd have to mount that on your own system. The Letpot unit here is a good option if you want a standalone system that you're going to sit on a table or even on a floor. The light face is quite unique. If we have a close look at that, you'll see that the LED lights are inserted in these little depressions. And I think what those depressions will do is concentrate the light downwards. So it's going to go right onto the plants that you're trying to grow. Similar to the last unit, this also has infrared chips. So that's better for the plants. Well, now let's have a look at the PPFD values for this light. You'll see the center has a value of 381. That's a pretty good value. It will certainly grow all your low light plants and even start growing some of your highlight plants. And again, this is at the 12-inch mark. The light spreads out fairly well, and around the edge we have about 150 PPFD. And that's still good for growing low light plants. So you have an area that can be used that's about 2 by 2 square feet. If we lower the light, we can get this up to 780 at 6 inches or 1050 at 3 inches. So at a height of 6 inches, you can grow just about anything here, and you can even flower most things. As far as the intensity of light goes from this unit, it's pretty good. I think if you're looking for a unit that's self-supporting and one that you can monitor and control from an app, this would be an excellent choice. In fact, out of the 6 we looked at, this is the only one that allows you to do that. If you're simply going for a light that has high light intensity and you're willing to mount it yourself and you don't need fancy control, well, then the previous one was a good option because it had slightly higher light output and was a little less expensive. There you have it, 6 budget lights that you can consider. What I've concluded from this analysis is that the low-end budget lights, the ring lights, and the ones that are on the flexible wires, they're really not very suitable for growing plants. Those are mostly decorative, or they might add some supplemental light, but they're not going to grow plants on their own. The flat panel light is not too bad, but it's still at the low end. The shop lights actually work fairly well, provided you're willing to put your plants very close to the bulbs. And the last 2 lights I looked at would be much better choices if you're trying to grow medium or high light plants. Now that you know how to buy an LED grow light, you probably have some other questions. How high should you hang it? And how many hours a day should that light be on for your plant? Well, the secret to that is the DLI, the daily light interval. And this video right here explains all that to you and helps you select the right duration and height for the light. If you've decided that you'd rather get a better quality LED grow light, here's a video that will show you how to pick the best one from the high quality units. Happy gardening.